Today, we are going to do an original piece of content, a tier list, ranking all of the Twisted Metal 2 characters from worst to best based on my experiences. Before we start, Minion is not on this list because he is overpowered, obviously, clearly better than everyone else. So with that said, let us begin. As the worst character in Twisted Metal 2, I decided to put Grasshopper here. We have three big stinkers who are all interchangeable depending on who you ask. But for me, I honestly don't see a use for Grasshopper. As I played through the game, my special was practically never used since 99% of the time you're going to be put into the worst position possible after activation. Plus, if you do not shield, you'll end up taking more damage than the enemy did most of the time. What you were born to do is a punishment on this character. Just sound logic if I've ever heard it. Like, sure, you can shield, use napalms, jump through a bunch of hoops to get value, but as we get up the list in this game, you'll notice how overpowered or broken a lot of the characters are here. There's no situation where I can see a player saying, hey, I want to play Grasshopper today over someone like Thumper, Mr. Grimm, Spectre, or Outlaw. It just doesn't happen. This character is just completely worthless. A great change for this character, I think, would be to make the damage scale up if you were to travel for longer distances. That would create amazing clips, like if someone flew across the whole map, ramped up the damage a ton, used the shield or some other weapon to instantly kill someone. That would be really cool, but unfortunately, we do not live in that world. Next in the Big Stink 3 is Hammerhead. I honestly struggled where to put these characters. Initially, I wanted to have Hammerhead at the bottom and then Grasshopper here, but after thinking a little bit, Hammerhead is shit, obviously, there's no getting around that. At least you do have some armor to tank up damage, and the character is fun to use, or as fun as a character like this can be. When you do have specials, you're able to kill Spectres and Outlaws exceptionally fast, dealing massive amounts of damage with ramming and a power missile or some sort of napalm combo. But that's really where the positives end. Hammerhead controls like ass and also seems to have this strange bug where you get stuck in the ground veering to the left, not being able to turn. This happened to me a few times during my playthrough. Not enough to piss me off, it just confused me more than anything. Every level turns into an ice skating rink, allowing enemies to get plenty of free hits on you. Trying to maneuver yourself around can be quite difficult, but I would say the most frustrating aspect is being completely useless against bosses. You're just a giant damage battery, you move really slow, your special's not going to scratch Minion or Darktooth, both of them are going to put you in a spin cycle if you even attempt. They will just pound you the entire time, so you need to play like a jackass to win. Hammerhead overall is just wildly frustrating with little moments of fun, and strange how a monster truck sucks balls in a car combat game. Just use Axel, he does Hammerhead's job 10 times better. The final Big Stink 3 is Twister for me, and yes, I know this character is used for the world record speedrun, but let's be real, barely anyone will be able to pull off those strategies consistently or maximize the effectiveness of Twister. Unless you're the elusive YouTube commenter, of course, excuse me, the people who have beaten the game with their feet, with their eyes closed, blindfolded in the bathroom, cannot forget about them. Obviously, those ones are able to do it every time without fail. I'm sure they've defeated the world record speedrun time and time and time again with no proof whatsoever. Definitely sure of that one. I get it. In theory, she works well. You get some remote bombs, you get multiple people in a special, you shield and then spam them all, especially on an incline to abuse the damage increase bug. This will make Twister very powerful. Sadly, getting the timing of everything down is difficult because this is one of those specials where if you don't use it right, you're going to take more damage than the enemies will. You need to do proper hoop jumping to make it work. Say if you got like 2 or even 3 people in your washing machine, that's it. You're in a bad spot. If you messed up your shield or you did anything wrong, you're going to die. It's game over. Which is the experience most people are going to get. They may pull off the combos on occasion to a single enemy, possibly 2 here and there. A majority of the time though, you're going to be frustrated. You have very weak armor where you're going to get obliterated by almost everything. Her armor is akin to Mr. Grimm, not too effective against bosses unless you truly understand the limitations, creating a very irritating experience. If you do not attempt utilizing these combos, Twister is actually worthless. Your special is so garbage without them, it's unfathomable. At the very least, you can drive around really fast and do some Sonic the Hedgehog shit, so you can have fun with that. Now that we are out of my big stink 3, we can talk about some real characters. I'm putting Roadkill here, a character who does have good armor, handling, speed, and a very unique special weapon, being able to shoot a boomerang, have it return and deal extra damage to your opponent. I love the creativity of it, I just don't see it being very viable. Some levels, it's almost impossible to pull this off. Moscow is a perfect example. Other levels, it's very situational to maximize this damage. Enemies need to be in a particular spot for everything to go your way. If you do not perform Roadkill's extra damage at all, you'd probably think he's a piece of shit because the damage is pitiful normally. It's nice if you miss. Sometimes the boomerang will come back, letting you regain the special you just lost. Not entirely sure why it's random or what causes you to reacquire a used special. It just happens whenever the game feels like it, I guess. The creativity is nice, as I said, and I think a very simple way to make Roadkill a top tier character here is just if the player could recall the boomerang on their own. Twisted Metal Head-On implemented that feature. Instead of dealing with the wonky timing or direction of the boomerang, the player could control the timing, allowing for a more consistent extra damage here. I think Roadkill is good in every other department though. You won't have any issues with his armor, handling, or anything else. His special weapon is just where it gets a little bit fuzzy for me, so this character can eat my shorts. It really does pain me to put Spectre this low on a tier list. It just makes me realize how top heavy Twisted Metal 2 is overall. It's not even to say Spectre is bad, because he's not, and honestly neither is Roadkill. That's just how Twisted Metal 2 is, I guess. The run and gun playstyle here for Spectre works perfectly fine, being able to drive around, shoot your missile. I'd say 90% of the time it will connect. Occasionally the missile will fly around and just spin everywhere and do nothing. Thankfully, nowhere close to as much as Twisted Metal 1. Spectre's speed, handling is everything you'd want from a character to fit in these shoes. As long as you're able to play around the fact Spectre does not have much armor, everything will be fine. You just can't go wrong with him. Unfortunately, I just think there are better choices in this game overall. Outlaw 2 is the next character for me, my favorite to play in this whole game. A very similar situation to Spectre, just with slightly less speed and slightly more armor. I don't think there's a tangible difference outside of very specific instances, but the idea of having a bit more armor in Twisted Metal 2 is something that I would take. I think my favorite part about Outlaw is how whenever you're near someone and you activate the special, it does the one little tick of damage, and then you can just drive away and the second tick will hit no matter where you go. So doing drive-bys can work almost perfectly each and every time. Going back and forth, dishing this out consistently is great. Again, I don't think the drive-by playstyle is as effective as a more brute force method in this game, but it's still completely viable and of course fun. Next is Mr. Slam, where some would ask, how could anyone put this character right here in a midsection on a tier list? A character who has a broken beyond belief special weapon, able to combo a napalm and instantly kill weaker targets, also able to deal massive amounts of damage to larger ones, which is obviously not wrong. It just comes at the expense of controlling like shit, which is perfectly fine. It makes sense. My issue and why I have him lower on a tier list is because he's completely useless against bosses. Very similar to Hammerhead, the special is essentially worthless to activate on a boss. It will do damage, but you're also sitting right next to Minion, who can tear you in half in a second. Darktooth will do the exact same. You become a battery of nothing, a massive car that controls horribly and has bad speed against both of them, forcing you to utilize other tactics against the bosses and pretend your special does not exist. But at least Mr. Slam is very strong against regular characters. If he was more effective against bosses, he would definitely be higher. Sweet Tooth is a good character who is also an asshole, controls horribly, does these random cartwheels when you take turns too fast. I'm not sure what that's about, but this is all worth dealing with because your special regenerates constantly and it's amazing. I don't know what the exact time frame is. You seemingly have an endless amount though. If you stack 4 to 5 of them, you can deal a ton of damage. The tracking on them is good, so hitting people will not be difficult whatsoever. Ramming is also very effective with him. Armor is formidable, and the biggest positive about playing Sweet Tooth is you do not need to deal with his shit-ass AI at all during the tournament mode. No more special spamming, specials flying through buildings, the cheating, it's all gone. Your only possible issue is having bad handling and speed, which compared to the positives is not a bad trade-off whatsoever. Thumper has a broken beyond belief special weapon. It's absurd, disgusting, weaker enemies cannot handle this. They will burn and die the instant you freeze them and press your special button. Just shoot a couple missiles and a little bit of machine guns and you're good. But that's honestly all this character really has. I noticed how shit you control here. I'm sure this was to balance him out. If he were to have immaculate control with a special of this caliber, the world would be scorched and this character would be blatantly overpowered, almost to the levels of Minion. Even with that, I still have him very high up on the list due to the sheer power of his special alone. It's a very risk-reward character, it seems. I think picking the most irritating targets is the best way to use this special. Right as the level begins, go after someone like Sweet Tooth, for example. Get rid of him right off the rip and you'll be better off. Just rinse and repeat that process. Thumper is very fun and satisfying to use, at least when you have his special recharged, because when you don't, you're stuck dealing with the awful handling. But honestly, who cares about that when your special is this overpowered? Shadow is next, who is a fantastic character for the most part. Obviously, he's able to abuse that explosion bug. If his special is activated on an incline, extra damage is dealt. Wonderful. But this is not always the most viable option and very situational. Levels like Holland, you cannot activate this period, at least to my knowledge. Others like Hong Kong, you need to lure AI to where you want them to be, so this tactic becomes effective. So in levels where you can't maximize this power, Shadow is exposed. His armor and speed is also much worse than I anticipated, but none of this takes away from the fact of how overpowered the special is, even though it is very situational. If you compare it to someone like Thumper, you don't even need to freeze. When you get the AI in the right spot, just shoot the special at a safe range and watch your enemies lose over half their health in some cases. Your only issue is blowing yourself up, so you need to be a little bit careful when you're using it. You can't be too reckless. What I will say is if Shadow was not able to abuse this explosion bug, I don't think he would be that good, but thankfully we can do it, so it makes him really strong.
Either subscribe, donate, or get the fuck out.
The best Mr. Grimm in the franchise right here, by gameplay standards, obviously not character model, that goes to Twisted Metal 3 undoubtedly. Right when a level starts, you can just drive up to a lost soul and send them to the underworld. Starting each and every level with essentially a free kill is perfection, even to larger enemies. Death comes almost instantly. Two specials will bring them to so little health. A fire missile and a little bit of machine gun fire kills them. Your only issue is how weak the armor is, having the weakest in the whole game. If anyone large rams you, Thumper activates his special, getting frozen, you're probably dead, but the power you possess is too great for that to even matter. Even against bosses, Darktooth and Minion will take so much damage from a single special use, plus the fact everything resets when those guys spawn in. You get those two right away, and you can remove almost half their health instantly. Mr. Grimm is buckets of fun to play as, and all powerful as long as you take caution. Warthog gets the silver medal. This character is a disaster and honestly a perfect choice for anyone who is new to the series or has never touched this game specifically. You have a very reliable special weapon that can also be combined with ramming to deal a load of damage, plentiful amounts of armor to tank various attacks or other special weapons. My first playthrough of hard mode was using this character and it helped out quite a bit. I feel like he is really strong in multiple facets to the point of him not really having any weaknesses. Like sure, the speed and handling isn't the best, but similar to Twisted Metal 1, where he was arguably the best character in that game, if you compare it to someone like Mr. Slam, Hammerhead, Sweet Tooth, the other big characters in this game, Warthog controls just fine. With the amount of armor you have, that's a very powerful factor. The only real problem you'll end up with is a top speed, and if that's the only thing I need to deal with, who honestly cares? Positives outweigh the negatives to such a disgusting degree. Warthog is easily top tier. And finally, as the big boss, the most obvious one of them all, Axel is a mess. This character makes me sick. Unlocking the power of having infinite special weapons, since ramming might as well be that said special, it deals so much damage, no one can handle this. Even against the largest enemies, Axel still crushes them beneath his wheels. We even have a code called Wheels of Death that allows Axel to deal even more ramming damage. I mentioned this at the beginning with Hammerhead, where I just said that character is a worse version of Axel, which is 100% true. You'd think a monster truck's identity would be ramming, but no, it's Axel instead. On top of that, Axel controls much better as well. He has better speed, better everything, and his actual special weapon with the Axel power is better as well. But if I take a step back, Honestly, Warthog and Axel could be interchangeable depending on who you ask for the number 1 spot. Both of them are just so good, literally anyone can have a good time with them, and they're both really strong. So with all of this said, this is my ranking of every Twisted Metal 2 character from worst to best. If you have a list of your own, make sure to leave yours in the comments below. Thank you for watching to the end. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and also check out the playthroughs I have done with each and every one of these characters with that playlist on screen now.